Up on.
Good.
Got it right. Okay, excellent. So that was, for those English speakers in the room that don't speak Filipino, that was, of course, good afternoon. And it will be a good afternoon, and let's progress. The first thing I need to do is to talk about language. Language is important. Language defines who we are, and language always changes. And when we look at this particular slide of this crowd surfers in a boat, it's a message and a slide that I can talk to for about 2 hours, but I've got an only total of 20 minutes, so I'll keep moving on this. I love this because this is a metaphor for the digital economy. They're surfing on fingers, okay? That's what this century is about. But more importantly than that, it's a group of millennials that are surfing on fingers. This is defining the economy of this century, is the demographic shifts and the cultural shifts that are about persons, they're about peoples, they're about communities, and it's important that we understand how that works. And I want to talk to you about how that fits into my view of how markets change and why this is a fundamentally different market shift than we've seen last century, but actually every market shift we're going to see this century is going to be different to the last. And this is specific for John. Here's our network dinosaurs from an artist in Australia. This is purely up here to entertain John, so I'm going to move straight on. And think about the things that change markets. Now, we all know the Economics 101. You get all early adopters, you move through adoption phases, and you actually get the adoption of a technology. And as you grow through that blue line, the yellow line represents the accumulation of a sale of anything. That could be seats, it can be wheelchairs, it can be solar panels, it can be TV sets. But we know, looking through a whole range of data from our economy, that we see these changes. And as new technology enters a market, the thing that we tend to forget is that old technology always exits. It's very, very rare for it to stay behind. And we see new technology exit, and many of you will have seen this little spaghetti diagram that basically all it shows is the tsunami. It shows the waves crashing on the beach. At the beginning of the century, last century, technologies took 20 and 30 and 40 years to really penetrate a marketplace. And as we got closer to the century we're now in, that wave stack got closer to the beach, the waves have got taller, and into our century, they're taller again. And so then we can think, well, okay, we're here to talk about energy today. And as we see that tsunami approach and stack up on the beach, what we need is a new Economics 101. And so you see the grey of the old Rogers S-curve on the screen, but you also see this new model from Accenture that they like to call the Big Bang. I like to call the tsunami or the shark fin, but what it represents is a more rapid change in our economy. We're measuring that day to day as we see new products. Doesn't matter what the products are, but as we see new products that are successful come into our marketplace, they adopt this model. And so in talking about energy, we have to ask first the question, how will our market be any different? And the logic is, it shouldn't be, it won't be. The primary challenge is we're all voyagers in time. We've all lived the time, but we haven't yet lived the future. And so as we're standing here, and I'm going to tell you that the future is really steep. It's coming as a big wave crash. It's coming like a tsunami. The problem is every one of us is mortal. Every one of us is human. And even I am standing there looking at the future going, what's it going to be? And most of us are assuming, it's going to be a lot like what we used to do, because that's what we're used to. That's one of the cultural issues that we humans have. We're very poor at understanding non-linear growth. What we are very familiar with is straight lines in the future, and the future very rarely is a straight line in the future. The next slide gets a bit data rich. I'm a geek. So, you start to think about the trajectories. If you use 50 years of data to work out what the next 10 years are going to be like, you're going to be wrong. If you use even 10 years of data from the past about what the future is going to look like, you're going to be wrong, because the future is changing faster than that. You can address those issues, of course, by making assumptions. Some might call them brave assumptions, bold assumptions, foolish assumptions. Nevertheless, the assumption that I make is things will change. And that's what I want to address today. And in everything, don't forget the exit. With every entry, there's always an exit. And a really simple example is moving between phone technologies. Moving from flip phones to the BlackBerry and now to the smartphones. that are now come to dominate most of our lives and most of the planet. It's pretty hard to imagine that only 10 years ago, when the iPhone and the modern generation of smartphone was released, it's pretty hard to imagine what impact it would have had on us back then. And now we see it today, and it is. And you notice the Forbes article talking about Nokia, we're invincible, we're at the top. They weren't. They were just on the way out. So here's a shopping list. You get the slide set, so I'm not going to read through all this particular one. But the important message of this slide set is it's not just about our industry. And it's not just about somebody else's industry. It's about all the industries. Because all the industries are changing at once. All of them are being fed by a data-rich environment. All of them are being fed by cloud computing. All of them are being fed by new ideas. And all of that builds up and creates change. So we don't work in a silo, although sometimes in some institutions we do, I know, but we don't work in a silo. So we've got to actually think about how that change will happen. And so it's not just about renewables, but it is about e-retail and market-led marketing. The idea that you put a product up into the marketplace and see how many would like to buy it before you even build it. Has anybody ever heard of Tesla? Tesla 3, that's exactly what they've done. They've said, we're going to produce this magic car and it'll be ready in 2 years. Who wants one? And everybody's thrown up their hand. That's market-led marketing. When we tell the manufacturer what it is we want. This is a fundamental shift in how we used to build cars. When we used to build Chevys, somebody would secretly design a few fins in a lab, stick it on the back of a red car, and then release it. And that's what we'd have to buy. We wouldn't get any choice. We wouldn't get any say. There'd be salespeople telling us, you need this. But that's how the world was. The world is now about market-led marketing. It's about the Internet of Things. It's about all of the convergence of the technologies and the smarts that are coming with it. Okay, so as I've got up there at the top, last century was very much about command and control. You had central banks for making money, or you had central newspapers for making newspapers, or you had central power stations for making power. This century will be about, because of this little device and whatever it evolves into, the next generation, there's one coming on shore, whatever this evolves into, suggest and choose. Based on our ability to interact with our supplier, we will tell them what we want. And if they fail to give it to us, we'll go to another supplier. Customer choice will be fundamental to all our decisions. Right, I've spent too long on that slide. I've got another 2 hours. No, I haven't. Okay, so let's get excited. We're in this phase of renewable energy growth. Geez, it's exciting. You can see all of this growth of renewables just happening now. But guess what? It's really just only getting started. This is real data. This is to 2017. And then if we think and if we imagine and if we assume how this market will change, then the growth to date isn't comparable to the growth that we're going to see. If my modelling is correct, and so far since 2011, I've been within about 10% of my forecasts after a couple of years. I remain, futurists never right. We're never right about the future. The challenge for a futurist is to be the least wrong. So far I've been the least wrong. And you'll see in there that I've got wind fast. I've got solar faster. That's in the data. It's already happening. And I've got batteries will be faster again. The adoption rate for batteries will be faster than the adoption rate for wind or solar. I've also got a little curve in there, a little teaser about concentrated solar thermal that I think will be absolutely critical in about 5 to 6 years' time. It'll be the new startup, but not yet. How does this all happen? Scale and volume. As you scale up production, you get volume. As your volumes increase, you reduce price. And so you get this cost curve between the red line going down, which is price, and in this case, the yellow line going up, which is volume of production. As things get cheaper, we buy more. The cheaper it gets, the faster we buy it. The faster we buy it, the more we make, the cheaper it gets, until we don't want it anymore. But at the moment, we still want this stuff. Think about it in this way. Here's a cultural shift. This is a graph you've never seen before, or maybe one or two of you have, if you've been following my Twitter feed. That is that TV sets are black and are big, they've got big, and they come out of a factory, they've got a bit of silicon in them. They're not that dissimilar in a really sort of fundamental layman's kind of way. They're not that different to a solar panel, which are black and flat and quite big and come out of a factory. And a year ago, we started making more solar panels than we did TV sets. Now that's got an interesting consequence that can fill a whole conversation and 2 bottles of red in a dinner party. But the primary thing that it fills is this idea that we've just made energy a consumer item in a way that it's never been before. The hardware of making energy is now a consumer item. So that's a fundamental shift in the way that this market happens. We then start to apply that to our actual market. This is data that I've pulled together that shows the gross growth of fossil fuel generation over the last decade, also netting the growth of fossil fuel generation over the last decade, and also the growth of renewables. You can see if we look at gross growth of fossil fuels, then renewables was, more capacity of renewables was added in 2015 than fossil fuel. But actually, if you account for retirements of fossil fuel plant at the same time, renewables actually added more capacity in 2011 than fossil fuels. This erosion of market share has started early and has been going on for a while. There's a number of other fundamental things that are really important in thinking about the way that this market shifts, and one of them is in the rate of build. This century is very much about being able to produce things quickly and efficiently out of a factory and deliver it. And coal-fired power plants usually take around about 6 to 7 years to build. If I want to build a coal-fired power plant, before I do that, I actually have to get a resource supply contract. The banks won't sign off on my financial close on my power plant until I've got coal to put into it. So not only do I have to negotiate a coal plant construction, but I've also got to negotiate the delivery of the materials before I'm allowed to get the financial close. So any decision that we take today to build a coal-fired power plant, if we've got the coal contract in hand, is at least 6 years away before it's producing. And a gas plant about 4 years. If I want to build a solar plant, it's a Meccano set. It's a IKEA outfit. It's just simply something that we can assemble. My ability to spend $300 million on a 300 megawatt power plant and get an output in 6 years, or spend $300 million on a 300 megawatt output and get output in 2 years, which would I choose? So the financial markets are already considering this. In Australia, there's been some really interesting differences in the way that the Australian markets behave. May have some application in the Philippines. We'll see how it plays out. But in Australia now has 7,000 megawatts of solar installed, 7 gigawatts of solar installed on rooftops of homes. 25% of housing in Australia now has solar rooftops. I expect that will be 50% in another 4 years. That's how the growth's going. There is in fact less opportunity for utility scale solar in Australia than we might imagine as a consequence of the inroads of rooftop solar. So the top yellow line, sorry, I should have explained, the top yellow line is the number of homes and the bottom yellow line is the capacity. The other thing that graph shows is that over time, homes are putting bigger and bigger solar systems on their rooftop to the point where homes in Australia now, on average, install 6.5 kilowatts of solar on a rooftop during an install. So it's quite a dramatic shift. Batteries are the thing that we really are waiting on. We've been saying, batteries are going to be the game changer. We've actually been building batteries for a long, long time. This is a curve showing the actual annual use of batteries on the planet into devices like this. And as you can see, last year, we built just shy of 200 gigawatt hours of storage. It's just that mostly it wasn't used for EVs and mostly it wasn't used for stationary storage. We've already got the capacity to build a lot of batteries. So then the next question is, will we? Well, we're on the same curve as solar. We've got another year or two to go. In fact, actually my view is that 2018 is the sweet spot. 2018 is the period from which we emerge where battery volume increases because battery prices come down. We're actually at that point now. I've actually publicly said now for 2 years that I don't think there'll be a new gas plant built on the planet after 2021 that is commissioned at financial close. Simply because this metric will change that. And that's fairly daunting for some. Others would tell me, Ray, you're nuts. That's okay. Batteries are all pervasive and they're changing in every aspect of what we do. We're increasingly becoming more mobile, and this is an example of a group called TTI. TTI in 2016 announced that all of their power tools, and in fact some of their manual tools, will now be battery operated. TTI make brands that you might recognise. What they said they were going to do was take AC corded machines and make them battery operated. They're going to take petrol machines and make them battery operated. They're going to take manual machines like secateurs or pruners and make them battery operated. And also enhance their current electrical range. Who are TTI? They make a whole pile of brands, including this one, Ryobi. And in 2018, they now have their entire power tool range optionally available as battery operated. On top of that, we've got electric vehicles coming along. This isn't about stationary storage, this is about how we use batteries. And so suddenly we've got electric vehicles coming along, producing a new demand. We're seeing battery electric vehicles already outstrip plug-in hybrid electric vehicles in the marketplace. And if I move on to my next graph, which I've obviously got to stall in, this is my ambitious, over-ambitious, maybe just a bit crazy, but this is my view of where I think the motor vehicle industry will go. We'll get rid of combustion engines in a hurry. And in an industry that used to have a headline a year, the car industry now has a headline a day, talking about how they will change. 10 years ago, a headline a day was just inconceivable, but today that's what we're expecting because that's how rapidly their business is changing. In the last 4 months, there have been $150 billion worth of commitments by the car industry towards batteries up to 2025. That's extraordinary. In 4 months, it'll be even faster. So I see combustion engines on annual sales being replaced in that time period. You can see that I've actually had a curve shaping down and showing a car exit and the exit of cars, peak cars, by about 2026. It says look at his own graph, 2024, let's go with 2024, that's what the graph says. And it's not because of electric cars, it's because of autonomy, it's because of self-driving. And don't forget, these are new car sales. And this is how these new car sales start to impact. Why do we buy fewer autonomous vehicles? Because we don't need as many cars in the garage anymore. This is a global market I'm talking about. It will obviously vary regionally from time to time. But if we see a loss of ownership of cars as a consequence of driverless, and at the same time we're moving electric, we've suddenly got a dual uplift of why the market will change. Yeah, because of electrics, but yeah, also because of these driverless, as we move from dumb cars to smart cars, as well as moving from dumb cities to smart cities and dumb homes to smart homes. All of this is integrated. And when you actually start to look at it in that way, it changes the vehicle fleet. But today, that's a talk for the third bottle of red. But it does impact in particular if my model is correct, and who knows if it is, let's find out. Wait 5 years, we might be there. It does start to impact dramatically on the consumption of oil on the planet, as we see not only an erosion of combustion engine vehicles in the fleet, but a displacement of consumption through the addition of electric vehicles. How does that look? Well, initially, we actually start making most of our batteries not for stationary storage, but for electric cars. Scale and volume. Scale and volume delivers reduction in pricing. And the value of electricity in a motor car is higher than the value of electricity in stationary storage. So rather naturally in my model, you actually see that electric vehicles take the lion's share of the first part of production of these cheaper batteries. But electric vehicles drive the production of cheaper batteries, which then make them available to the rest of us in the stationary storage market. And that happens in my model quickly. If I'm right, then we should expect this to happen quickly, which is why I say that I don't expect a new gas peaker or gas plant to be built post-2021. We've built lots of solar already. We've built 100 megs of solar last year out of a factory, so that is to manufacture these things. Can we do the same with batteries? Actually, as I said, we've already built that many batteries. We've built twice as many batteries out of factories last year alone. And the question is, can we grow it quickly enough? So then we have to worry about things like resource constraints, and this is the modelling that I've done forward for lithium and how it might be taken up. And that's a bucket load of lithium. That's an 8-9-fold increase in the amount of lithium we're producing in 2017 to 2025 to actually feed the model that I'm saying. Is that even possible? It represents about 200 million tonnes of ore. That's a bucket load of ore. In the last 10 years, Australia took its iron ore production from 200 million tonnes of iron ore to 800 million tonnes of iron ore. That is a 3-fold bigger increase in production in iron ore alone than we're needing for lithium to supply this battery market. So these are feasible numbers. They're actually practical. If all this adds up, and if I happen to be right, and somebody has to buy me a beer in 2 years because I've got a bet for 2020, then this is what the shape of the market starts to look like. We see a peaking of oil consumption by the mid-20s. We see, I already believe we're on a coal exit. The International Energy Agency, on their early numbers, suggests that there was an uptick in coal last year. I'm waiting on seeing additional numbers before I can say that that's confirmed, because it doesn't make sense, because we've been retiring coal plant. After that, you get the purple line is gas. I see a gas exit happening also, or a very gentle gas exit, I might add, but starting to happen mid-20s. And on top of that, I see an acceleration of renewable energy starting from the early 20s. We haven't got going yet. It's just warming up. And it doesn't have much consequence for nukes. Nukes do continue, although we do get some erosion in later times. If we add all that up into energy consumption, and then it starts to look like this. We actually see a peak in carbon production by the mid-20s, and we also see, you'll see on that graph, I've also got a peak in energy consumption, global energy consumption. Why? Because of the unsung hero that we keep on ignoring, and that's because of energy efficiency, the impact of energy efficiency on the market. Even though we've got growth in the Philippines and India and China, energy efficiency will shave off all of that growth into that period, in my view. You've seen this graph before. You're going to get the slide set. I won't stay on this slide because I'm almost out of time. Robotics a bit scary for some. Sarah said something like that earlier today. But ultimately, robotics will be another one of the game changers. How it's going to work, it's hard to say, but guess what? Something else with batteries. We can think about how this technology is impacting on our energy use globally. We can think about how we navigate a city. We can think about where we see things that we don't expect to see things. And we can think about what accidents might have been avoided along the way. The sign on the side of the truck says, "On the road to success, there are no shortcuts." It's stuck under the bridge. It tried the shortcut. As we deliver goods through smarter traffic management, through smarter vehicles, that will never happen again. It won't be up to a driver to make a decision to go under a bridge. It will be already calculated data in a vehicle. These sorts of accidents, we talk about other motor vehicle accidents, but even these sorts of accidents will improve productivity, improve efficiency, and change the way we work. We'll see this right across industries. Here's another example, robotisation in agriculture. And guess what? Solar-powered electric vehicles and solar-powered drones are being used in this example, as well as a solar-powered glasshouse for the production of food. Great news, don't read this. This is on the slide set. This just summarises what I've just said. Read it later. The real thing I want to get to is another comment, which is that one of these fundamental shifts in energy is that coal-fired power stations generally belong to corporations. But if we're really producing a consumer commodity in solar, we've now got an item that is a consumer item that belongs to people. Energy generation will now belong to each of us, not to groups. That may scare some people, it may cause other people to dance in the streets. But regardless of your opinion of it, it's what is the reality. This is where we've gone. And the core challenge in this is how do you actually look at the future? The future growth is accelerating. And then the question is, how do you understand when you leave the asymptote? When do you leave that bottom line? How do we define that? And the only answer is vigilance of the current data set. If you're looking at data that's more than a couple of years old, you're not vigilant. If you're looking at data that's more than a couple of years old, it's not telling you enough. You actually have to be up to date on that data. And that's what part of my team do at Future Smart. There's the pretty slide set, and I've finished. Thanks for listening.
We do have time for a question with Ray, if anyone has a question they'd like to ask him. Okay, well, I'm sure you're saving them for the panel that's coming up next, so thank you very much, Ray. Okay, I'd like to invite the